Padma is the last leg of the mighty Ganges, and that's a mighty story. When we talk about the Ganges, it is often about the powerful origin myths, but the end of the Ganga is an equally important story, and that is about the Padma. Padma is made powerful by the Jamuna and the Meghna, no doubt, but it is truly a reincarnation of the mighty Ganges. I have thought about this. What happens when the Ganga becomes the Padma? The dynamic delta happens when the Ganga becomes the Padma. This happens with the Ganga bifurcating into two flows, the Hugli Bhagirathi and the Padma itself. I see these two flows as two fluvial and ecological axes with very distinct cultural aspects. Perhaps this is how the eastern and western parts of Bengal can be defined, which Amartya Sen described as two charismas.
Within Bangladesh, strictly speaking, the Padma is less than 120 kilometers long if we consider the flow between the Indian border and its confluence with the Jamuna and Goalanda. Yet, combined with the Jamuna and Meghna, the Padma remains a major force for Bangladesh public space in all its manifestation, which I have referred termed in my article as the Padma process. The Padma process is at its best when you look at it from the lens of its confluence, or in Bangla what we call Nodi Sangam, with the Jamuna. If the Dhaka and Chittagong are considered Bangladesh's political and commercial capital, respectively, Goalanda could be considered its ecological capital, for here the grand confluence of the two major rivers of Asia shaped the world's largest delta. And which provided the physical foundation for Bangladesh. For example, the significance of the Padma system lies not merely in the fact that it drains about 40% of Bangladesh's landscape, but also because it paves for certain ecosystem that shelter mangoes in Rajshahi to the mangrove in the Sundarbans, the very delicate hilsha fish, as well as the finest almond rice variety. And it has been at the heart of Bangladesh's agroecology.
We know that the subcontinent collided with Asia about 50 million years ago. So those mountains have kind of slowly been crimping and crinkling up to be, of course, the tallest in the world. And so I was captivated by going to the Paturia ferry terminal and just seeing this all around in terms of just these different tectonic crumbs, and walking there with a geographer from the Institute who had said he had never been to the Himalayas before. And so that's how the essay begins, of really doing this slow walk through this landscape, and thinking of this as almost like tectonic coughs and hiccups, muddy hiccups and coughs, not trying to necessarily turn the river basin into something akin to a human being, but more thinking of it as a kind of sediment sorting machine. And to that end, looking at then the ways in which, if we think of this as really an extension of the Himalayas, we know that not only is the delta one of the largest in the world, but also the amount of alluvium that's been deposited there for all of those millions of years makes it one of the deepest kind of alluvial tracts in the world. So I saw it as almost a kind of inversion of the Himalayas, where if the Himalayas are incredibly tall, let's say above sea level, then they're kind of inverse, and all that sediment is also incredibly deep. It's several kilometers deep in the larger bay. So that's kind of the almost sectional or transect cut through the basin that the essay is trying to look at.
এই চ্যাপ্টারটিতে মূলত টলেমির সময় থেকে শুরু করে তার পরবর্তী পর্তুগিজ জিওগ্রাফার, ব্রিটিশ কার্টোগ্রাফার্স, আরব জিওগ্রাফার্স এবং চাইনিজ ট্রাভেলার্স তারা ম্যাপে বেঙ্গলকে কীভাবে ডেসক্রাইব করেছেন ওই বিষয়গুলো আমরা নিয়ে এসেছি। আমাদের দ্বিতীয় যে চ্যাপ্টারটি সেটির নাম হচ্ছে দ্য পদ্মা ডিনামিক্স, এ নিউ জিওগ্রাফিক আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ডিং। এই চ্যাপ্টারটিতে মূলত আমরা গ্যাংগেজ ডেল্টার যে বাউন্ডারি ডিমার্কেশন নিয়ে আমরা কথাবার্তা বলেছি। এর সাথে পদ্মা নদীর গত 100 বছরের হাইড্রোলজিক্যাল মরফোলজিক্যাল চেঞ্জের ব্যাপারে আমরা কথা বলেছি। এর সাথে সাথে আমরা পদ্মার ইকোলজিক্যাল হরাইজন নিয়ে কথাবার্তা বলেছি, প্লাস পদ্মার যে একটা স্পেশাল ক্যারেক্টার হিলসা ফিশ, এই হিলসা ফিশের তার হ্যাবিটেট, তার থ্রেডগুলো নিয়ে আমরা কথাবার্তা বলেছি।
No other book has looked at the Padma or the Padma in such a comprehensive way, including the geological, the hydrological, the literary, the historical, and the human installations that have been made in and around it. Padma is a monumental theatre of nature, the greatest living, moving force on earth. It moves 400 billion cubic feet of silt every year. It's equivalent to 300 pyramids the size of Giza. The dynamic also continues into the ocean, into the Bay of Bengal, and creates a submarine landmass that is greater than the two Bengals put together. The river imaginary in the subcontinent is overwhelmingly about the Ganges. But in our book, we have tried to look at not how the Ganges has been typically recorded, seen, and narrated, especially with its origin stories. Padma defines the termination of the Ganges in the grand opera that is Bengal. So it's more than just a name change from Ganga to Padma. It's a qualitative shift. Padma represents a new grandeur, new enchantment, like the flower Padma. It's a rebirth. Padma is the soul of Bengal. It has always been larger than life. In fact, Padma will always define life.
So what I did was I looked at as I said, the archive, and tried to figure out what impression Padma had on the poets and writers, as well as painters and photographers. And just about anyone who was working with Padma, I remember exploring the songs of Abdul Alim and Abdul Latif about Padma. And then you have these Bhatiyali songs, which are intimately connected to the flow of the river and the change from one season to the other. And Padma has been described as Kirti Nasha, one which does not allow glories to accumulate, which likes to destroy whatever human beings have accumulated, reminding you that life is basically a transient thing. And then the bowels of Kustia, many of them tying their knots to the river in ways that imbibe them to go to the soul of the river. So let's say from the external topography of the river to its hydrology, people have gone to the soul of the river. And this is what I have found in songs. I have found in a particular book by Joshimuddin. It's called Padma Par, the banks of the river Padma. Then Rabindranath Tagore, who has recorded his impressions in Chinnapatra. Chinnapatra, as I said, is a record of his journey, which he has given through a series of letters written to his 14-year-old niece. And these show the changing moods of the river and the daily activities that go on the book, on the waters of Padma, and the simple life that people live on both banks. Because one thing Padma makes you believe in is the transience of life.
It started because human needed to go across the rivers. And so how to do? The only thing is to swim, but you cannot swim across very large rivers like the Padma River or the Brahmaputra. And so they started to sail on a tree, on the trunk of a tree. But then you can just go with the current, and difficult to go back, and it's not comfortable. You cannot carry many things, no, not many people. So the improvement of that was there were two lines. The first one was to attach together several trees or bamboos. So this is the line of the rafts. So there were many rafts, but other had the idea of digging into the tree, and so started to appear the dugouts boat. So I think, and I'm not the only one to think that the first dugout boats were made out of palm trees. Why the palm trees? Because in fact the palm trees are the heart of the palm tree is soft. So it would be easier to dig out the palm tree than other trees. And so after the first dugout, which was very tiny, could carry only maybe 2 people, 3 people maximum, very unstable because the shape is totally round. So the idea was to extend this palm tree with the planks on the sides. And so this is the beginning of the evolution of the boats, especially in South Asia, but of course in many other places in the world.
What's interesting about both of the films is that they base themselves on Manik Bandyopadhyay's novel Padma Nadir Majhi. And it's interesting to see how one novel produces so many different sort of cinematic versions of itself. Jago Hua Sovera was about the lives of fishermen living alongside the river and having to deal with the machinations of a moneylender who is also the person to whom they sell their fish and who also subsidizes their larger projects of their lives, such as building a boat, owning their own boat, and so on. Padma Nadir Majhi is, of course, also about fishermen living alongside the river. But here you really see the Padma much more prominently. It's a lot livelier of a river. It's the actual river. And even though you are focused on the lives of the fishermen in the hands of rapacious elements, both of nature and of social elements, what's interesting here is that the moneylender, Hossein Mia, is not as unambiguously evil or bad, right? He has this other dimension to him because he, owns this deep, Moina Deep, this island, and he is trying to resettle the people there in an effort to create a utopian society. And of course, those actions of his of trying to trap people into going there, etc., make him out to be bad. And the fact that he is the person who owns pretty much all the means of production here, the boat, the money, the fishing nets, etc., also makes him out to be not a straightforwardly sort of like, well-meaning elder of the village, but still there's a little bit more nuance there.
So that is when I first heard about a chicken curry that used to be cooked on the Goutam steamer, and which my uncle and my grandfather, they had all eaten, because I had by then gotten so interested that I had started reading up anything and everything that I got on the Goutam fowl curry. And one of them was Syed Mustafa Ali's essays. And he has mentioned the Goutam fowl curry in quite a few of his essays. And he also says that, none of the women traveling on the steamer from Bikrampur, the women from Bikrampur were supposed to be the best cooks in all of Bengal, that none of the women have ever been able to replicate the Goutam fowl curry. The fowl curry, he did not call it the Goutam fowl curry, he had said the fowl curry cooked on the steamers by the Khalasis.
The project has achieved many monumental objectives. It is now the longest bridge over the Padma Ganges River in terms of span and total length. That's a very significant achievement. The final design as built now It defies monsoon. It's seismic resilient, scour tolerant. So it's a very sustainable solution. And we prefabricated 150-meter span modules, each module is 150-meter long. Steel concrete composite. It is a world record. We've driven the longest and deepest piles into the river. Each pile is about 122 meter long. Phenomenal. It's 2-level. The top deck for cars, for vehicles, and the lower deck is for cargo trains. Finally, in fact, the reason why it is called Padma multi-purpose bridge, in addition to a highway and the trains, it carries utilities. Notably, we carry a 750-meter gas main in the lower deck, so multi-purpose.
My personal encounter with River Padma goes back to my childhood. Incredible stories told by grandparents, father, grandfather, grandmother. Actually, our family belonged to Padma Basin. Father's family from Phoritpur and mother's from Bikrampur, on the east and west bank of the river. When I had thought of doing a film based on Manik Bandopadaya's famous novel Padma Nadir Majhi in the early 90s, my father was the happiest person. He said, he exclaimed almost, "Etodine ekta kamer moto kam kortesos." After all these years, you're doing something worthwhile, my son. I have vivid memories of our first recce during the monsoon of 1991. As we were plying through the turbulent Padma by a Swedish boat, I found a speck in the river through my still camera's viewfinder. As we moved farther, a tiny boat was revealed. And what I found to my surprise, a little girl with a pet dog was negotiating the mighty river happily, fearlessly. That's life on Padma. Life is fantastic on River Padma. I think, knowing the river through this book should be an enriching experience for the readers because, it's a very comprehensive one. And I'm really eagerly waiting to reading out the book and having a personal copy. I again congratulate the team for this wonderful work. And in this age of greed and ecological disbalance, let us hope our beloved Padma will flow for eternity.